My research is about choice and ethical preferences in well-being trade-offs. Where can I just, sorry, which one should I? I'll try. Okay, so the agenda for today, I want to give a little bit of a context and then how we are dealing with our questions and our results so far. Oops, this one. Yep. So our investigation started, I think a lot of people here know that well-being is being used in policy, ever so more often, and in relation or trying to substitute monetary measures. Wales, where I work at Cardiff University, is part of the Wellbeing Alliance, trying to use well-being as a policy metric. And we cannot trade, we sort of, there's a effect on our community or where we live, on our level of well-being. You can have some sort of transmission effect, but you cannot trade. Like money can be used to trade. So from that perspective, we started thinking about well-being in choices from a risk standpoint. So how much are we trying or willing to risk to gain more well-being? We have three main research questions. The first one is how, we are trying to quantify willing to take risks to gain well-being points, scores, and then trying to understand how that internal individual preference translates to accepting more or less inequality in well-being society. And lastly, we're trying to see if we're able to create some sort of prediction model for choices. So yeah, what is well-being? So as it's important, there's plenty of different measures or that you can use, and the methodology varies. So we are going with the ONS questions. And lately we decided to focus on life satisfaction. So in the first iterations of our research, we tried several 4 questions, but we end up choosing just life satisfaction. And in terms of dimensions, we also started with the ONS ones. My literature review, a lot of other dimensions were incorporated, but then finally we narrowed it down to 3 main dimensions that we grouped together in career and personal finance, personal and physical autonomy, and then relationships. Sorry. For our second question, one of the things that sparkled our interest is the well-being problem or well-being question. Well-being is basically an average. So if someone in the top end of the scale gain 1 point, it's the same thing as someone in the lower end of the scale gaining 1 point. And we were like, is it fair? Is it aligned with what people expect policy to be focusing at? So from that questions, we decided on a survey based on those 4 main axes. So we are using vignettes to try to balance out different people's perspective and just create a level playing field. For our analysis, we are using standard gamble and discrete choice models. And finally, we incorporated a psychometrics instrument to map our participants' risk profile. For the standard gamble, just a brief review. We are using it because time trade-off, it was one of our options, but because we want to unveil trying to understand risk, we decided on standard gamble, and also because it's based on rational choice theory, that gives us a mathematical background to work with. And we are using this chained approach because we're interested in all the levels of one person's understanding of risk in all the levels. For the discrete choice model, this is a basic sort of abstract model of a discrete choice. So you have option A, B, and the participant choose between them. They have different levels of risk and attributes and potential gains or consequences. And for our risk profile questionnaire, the psychometrics instrument, we are going with measuring risk attitude scale. We chose, first it incorporates our domains of main domains of choice, but it also brings the question of prior knowledge to attention, because when it presents a statement to the participant, it brings both action and risk. So if the person have not really a good understanding of what white water rafting is, then is there like saying it can be unsafe to you, like skydiving, that sort of thing. But there are also just other questions that will help understand what the risk involved is. So another thing we are doing to address the prior experience issue is to basically have a yes or no question, asking the participant if they had any previous experience with making risky choices and risky choices that end up impacting their well-being negatively. Our initial approach, though, was a little bit different, and we learned a lot. We interviewed 20 people, and then the first 12, we were making changes in our questionnaire. And then finally, we used 8 participants with the same questionnaire in the end and trying to get some data from them. This is our initial vignette, and this experiment, as you can see here, is quite lengthy and wordy. But basically, it's a short story, and then there is an intervention happening. And then we try to estimate if that intervention would succeed, how much more or how many points of well-being would the character gain, and the opposite as well. If that intervention would fail, how many points of well-being would this character lose? And we would ask the participant to give us a ratio, a success to ratio, failure ratio of what the character should accept the treatment. We evolved the questionnaire a little bit, but it was still quite lengthy. And we had participants taking like an hour to answer it on interviews, which we thought wouldn't be ideal for the next iterations of research. This is the second question we were interested at. There's the societal distribution, or how much inequality are you willing to accept in society in terms of well-being? It was really hard to make people understand what we were trying to say or give us answers. We end up just dropping the question completely. Yeah, so if anyone has any tips, I would be very welcoming to them. And this is our third experiment. It was basically a investment game. You'd give someone a hypothetical amount of money and ask them if they want to keep their coins for themselves, or if they are willing to donate part of it or share the coins. If the person said, oh, I want to donate my coins, would say, oh, you got a lot of coins, and ask them if how they would like to invest that money in different projects that would target people in different levels of well-being. What we learned from those interviews, one thing that went according to plan was that the vignettes were rated in sort of what we were expecting, the levels we were expecting, but this was below our expectations. We thought that the interventions would give more points. The person would assign more points to success. And the opposite was also true. We were expecting -2 points, but then we had situations where we had -5 points if an intervention failed. So that led me personally to be quite interested in the question of expectations and how expectation plays a role in the assignment of scores and decisions we make. But that's a separate point. Yeah. And that's the allocation of resource result. So I had one participant saying to me, oh, it's not only about improving someone's well-being, but keeping it high. So we should allocate some money to very high levels of well-being as well, because it takes work to keep your well-being level at a high level. So yeah, it was quite interesting. I had another participant saying, I don't want anyone to be 10 because happy people are idiots. And I'm like, wow, okay, that's extreme, but valid, I guess. So we had quite interesting answers to that sort of question. So what we are doing now, and this is So now this is an online questionnaire. This is our second big iteration. So it's not a one-on-one interview anymore. And we have basically 7 phases of our online survey. One is about your personal level. So we want to see how you rate yourself. Then we present you gambles, and then we ask a personal question related to your past prior experiences, our risk profile, political options, demographic questions, and just a numeracy check, because in a one-on-one interview, we had some difficulties communicating, or at least there were people very uncomfortable with dealing with probabilities. So we decided to add that. How we are approaching the vignettes are quite different as well. We have the main dimensions on a table now, the levels, and then we ask participants to rate that. So what this person, hypothetical person A, with this sort of life, how would you rate it? And then use those ratings to create the gambles. So basically it's option A and B. One is a certainty, guaranteed result, and the other one is a risky treatment. And the numbers here are given by the person in the first table. And then just a choice experiment. If the person says no, we keep decreasing the risk. And we also aid the participant with a basic comparison with the risk of an adult in the UK to die on a given day. For our second question, the one we completely dropped off, we are just now trying to understand from a different perspective and using the same gamble sort of question, but asking the participant to imagine they are a policymaker and how they would choose if they had to be in this situation. So for all those scenarios, we are using standard gamble modeling, traditional expected utility theory, but using the chained approach. There are a few challenges in the maths, but it's quite straightforward. One thing we are experimenting with, and I don't have any results so far, is with using risk-weighted expected utility theory, which is quite a different approach that incorporates a risk preference function. So for each risk level, you'd have a different weight. You still have a utility of 300, let's say, but this person gives less weight more weight in fact to a higher risk. So it incorporates, in this case here, you're seeing like an example of someone who is risk averse, but there are cases where the person is less risk averse or risk seeking, and then the green bits would be bigger than the original black bits. So yeah, as a utility function, just like a normal expected utility theory would have us doing, and a probability function, but also the risk function I was mentioning. And I'm quite excited about doing this sort of analysis and seeing the differences, but we don't have any results to the moment. Summarizing what we've been doing so far, so you're using standard gamble to try to understand preferences. And it was a long journey. It was really fun for me as a PhD student to do all the interviews and learn a lot about design and instrument design and the survey, but it's full of ups and downs when we are concerned with both ethical preferences and individual level, but also in societal level. And it's been quite hard to find the right wording for that sort of question. And we are experimenting with risk-weighted expected utility. So yeah. Thank you for your time.
I can manage. First question. I'm sorry if I missed it. Do you have I think you had 12 people in the end, is that right? And then
no, I have 20 people, and then the first 12 people we were experimenting with, like tweaking the questionnaire. We're using the data I was showing. It was just for the last 8 people.
I guess my first thought is it's related to some previous discussion that people may have a difficult time evaluating circumstances completely outside their own range. And so I think Mark mentioned yesterday that he was proud of his sample, including people from lots of different backgrounds, ages, and various factors. So I'm wondering what your next step is now. And I think that, expanding the sample might be time-consuming, costly, but extremely valuable.
Yeah. So the first sample, I tried to recruit beyond university students, and focus on numeracy levels. So I focused on trying to find people that have just in the British context, just GCSEs, A levels, like all educational levels. So I was more concerned with educational level and numeracy than anything else. For this online survey, we are using a representative sample from a survey platform.
Thank you. Just to precise, happy people are idiot. It was also a cut of the General de Gaulle. Happy people are idiot. It's also a cut of the French General de Gaulle who said that. And something else, in fact, is it possible also to include uncertainty, which is not a kind of non-stochastic approach, because your implicit assumption is that people are able to calculate a kind of probability. And most of the time, it's not possible, in fact, to calculate that. So how it's possible to include the idea of non-stochastic approach, the real uncertainty, and if you think that you will have the same result, Most of people are not able to optimize, but they just have a viable behavior, you see.
Yeah, it's a good question. In the beginning, we were thinking about that sort of issue, if approach really, and then we decided to go with fixed probabilities just for ease of calculation and what we were trying to understand. But it could be a future avenue. Yeah.
And just following up on the point about the sample, I think it would be really interesting to recruit some young mothers into your sample, because we know when they do standard gamble, they tend not to trade. And so it would be a nice way of kind of exploring the validity of your risk function.
That's really good comment. When I began my PhD, I was really interested in working with people in a maternity ward, but it was really hard to get approval on ethics. But I would love to do that, really. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move along then. Thank you very much.